wanna take advice from fools. I just figure everything is cool until I hear it from you.
Super Bowl 46 preview 2012. It is the New York Giants and the New England Patriots. I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. Here is the official betting preview. Sports betting odds on this contest have New England at -3 with a total of 55. Now, for a lot of you, this might be extremely technical, but for the professional gambler, this stuff is a godsend. The Giants are 12-7 straight up, 11-7 to the number. They've gone over 11-7 with a push. Patriots, meanwhile, 15-3 straight up, 10-7 against the spread, going over 12-6. Now, the Giants' rushing attack has been abysmal, getting just 3.6 yards per rush to teams that normally allow 4.3. Conversely, they are a passing machine at 7.8 passing yards per attempt. The defenses that permit just 6.9. This comes out to 6.1 yards per play. New York is very effective in the yards per point category, using just 15.5 versus squads that allocate an average of 16.3. We'll get to these specific explanations on what that means to you, the gambler, in a moment. Now, New York has been adequate at best on defense, permitting 4.5 yards per rush to teams that are normally getting 4.3, and 6.7 passing yards per attempt to 7.0. This equates to 5.8 yards per play to 5.8, which is obviously the epitome of average. All the OffshoreInsiders.com handicappers will have the preview, the picks for the Super Bowl at, of course, OffshoreInsiders.com. Now, on defense, those Giants do force teams to use up a yard per point more than their normal average of 15.9 to 4.9, so that is good. They've been very efficient on defense. New England gets 4.0 yards per rush that normally allow 4.2, but they get a fantastic 8.3 yards per pass to teams that normally allow just 6.8 and 6.5 yards per play to 5.6. They're very efficient with the ball, using just 13.2 yards per point to squads that usually force 15.1. On defense, they're very generous, allowing 4.5 yards per rush to those that average 4.3, and 7.5 passing yards per attempts to squads that normally accumulate 6.7 and 6.3 yards per point to 5.6. They also force only 19.4 yards per point to units that average 16.1. Now, again, a lot of you are saying, what the heck is yards per point? It's determined by dividing the total yards by the number of points. Offensively, a lower number is considered to be more efficient. Meanwhile, in defense, the higher number is better. Now, we're going to have some ATS trends in a moment. Please visit joeduffy.net as you will take a look at some proposition odds for the Super Bowl, and you want to check it every single day as the Super Bowl approaches. Of course, you may be listening to this on Super Bowl Sunday, and you'll see the completed proposition odds, as there are so many. Now, all records are ATS when it comes to these spread betting trends. Giants are just 7-24 off of a game in which they punted at least 8 times and had 2 or fewer turnovers. But they're 18-4 off of a game in which they scored more points than the odds makers projected, but they trailed after the first quarter in that same game. They're also 11-1 off of a game in which they trailed after 3 quarters, but wound up winning the game straight up. They're 10-27 off of a road game in which they punted at least 6 times. Again, all these records we quote are against the spread. Now, all teams, here's an angle. In this case, we're talking about New England, but all teams are 12-43 off of a win of 3 or less in a game in which they punted 2 or fewer times. This also applies to New England, but all teams are 18-3 following a game against the Ravens in which they were held to under 100 yards rushing. And all teams are 10-0 coming off a game of the Ravens in which they were listed as favorites. Now let's take a look at some over-under trends again from OffshoreInsiders.com. All teams, and this applies to the Giants, have gone over 46-18 if they've had at least 8 punts and 3 sacks in their last game. Giants have gone over 22-5 following a game which they trailed after the first quarter and had no turnovers for the game. Giants have gone over 19-4 off of a game in which they had at least 6 punts but rushed for less than 100 yards. New England's going over 26-12 off of spread loss if the previous total was 44.5 or higher. Remember all the Super Bowl picks and more on the OffshoreInsiders.com network. Everything you need, everything the gambler needs is at www.offshoreinsiders.com.